going on, Bengals fans? Stone Shields on hand for another edition of Bengals Breakdown. And coming up on today's show, we're going to be talking about this new story from Adam Schefter. Schefter listed the offseason's most interesting teams. There was 5 teams that he discussed. We'll talk about where he had Cincinnati in that list and what exactly makes them so interesting this offseason. But all of us Bengals fans, I'm pretty sure we know what that is at this point. Also coming up on today's show, Tee Higgins talked with Joe Danneman of Fox 19, kind of had a brief conversation with him, but I think there's a lot we can pull from that conversation as well. He talked about, him approaching free agency and potentially staying here in Cincinnati or potentially having to find a home elsewhere. I really thought there was a lot of impactful statements that he made and really just the tone in which he had in this interview, so we're going to be dissecting that on today's show as well. But before we get into that, make sure you guys share today's video for me on social media if you have not done so already. Any platform, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. We're just trying to get the word out there to more Bengals fans that aren't exactly tapped into what we are doing here at Bengals Breakdown. So help me out, share today's video for me right now. So Adam Schefter actually had the Cincinnati Bengals as the single most important team this NFL offseason, and rightfully so, given the things that are going to happen with Ja'Marr Chase, Tee Higgins, and, of course, Trey Hendrickson, whether or not all those guys will be coming back or just Ja'Marr Chase, or if 2 guys are coming back, whatever the case may be. Here's his list here, 1 to 5. Obviously, Cleveland at the top of this list as well after Myles Garrett, star pass rusher. He requested a trade from the organization. Kind of interesting to have New Orleans up here. That was a bit of a surprise to me. New England certainly has a lot of cap space, could make some moves there, young quarterback. New York Jets obviously there at number 5 as well. It's the Jets. They always seem to get a ton of attention regardless of how well they do. They got a new head coach coming in as well. So very obvious to me that Cincinnati definitely is the most interesting team at the top of this list because they have an organization that needs to make some decisions and pay up. That's something they haven't done a lot of in the past. We'll touch on Trey Hendrickson here for a second. Today's show is going to be a lot more focused on Tee Higgins, of course, but of note, Trey Hendrickson, of course, requested a trade last season, and he's looking for a new contract, due only $16.5 million or $16 million, this coming season. He's looking for an extension, he's looking for a new deal, or perhaps get traded if he is not able to come to terms with the Cincinnati Bengals. We've talked about him a lot on previous shows, and we'll continue to talk about him going forward, but certainly going to spend the bulk of today's show on Tee Higgins. Let's get into what exactly Schefter had to say in his piece up on ESPN. He said if they sign Chase to his record deal, it could include a large signing bonus and a low 2025 base salary, giving him a team-friendly cap number for this coming season that would help with Higgins. Cincinnati could work to re-sign Higgins before he becomes a free agent or put a $26 million franchise tag on him. Lower than what he probably would receive on the open market. I do believe that is very noteworthy there. Tee Higgins probably going to be in that $30 million range. The team also could opt to tag and trade Higgins, but that would require carrying the cap space past the new league year. Really, overall, nothing new here from Adam Schefter, right? I think we all understood how big of an offseason this was for Cincinnati, but the biggest thing for me is that an adjustment needs to be made from this organization. We've harped on it a lot here at Bengals Breakdown, but they have to pivot. They're in a situation now where they could be Super Bowl contenders if they do the things that they need to do and, act like a winning organization. They're going to have to make some adjustments. Now, going into this season, I'll be honest, I stood up here and I said, I'm content with this being Tee Higgins' final year in Cincinnati. And there was a lot of people out there publicly in the media, especially local media, that were pretty split on this as well. It was, probably Tee Higgins last year. We'll run it back one last time. We'll see if we can win a world championship. Obviously, the defense was horrid. We all understand that, and things did not work out. But you have to be able to pivot. The way he finished that season, certainly the injuries are a concern, which we'll touch on here in a little bit, but the way he finished that season, that game he had against the Denver Broncos, he looked like a perennial wide receiver in the National Football League. You see the production there at the end of the season, and the biggest thing that stands out about is how he is able to open up things for that guy on the left there, Uno. When Tee Higgins is out there, Jamar Chase is obviously always fantastic, but when Tee Higgins is out there on the football field, Jamar Chase is able to up his game and take that next step as a football player. So really, you really got to work to change the narrative so you can be considered a serious football team in the NFL. I get it's not really about narratives and it's about how you play out there on the football field, but this Cincinnati Bengals team needs to change the narrative because the narrative right now is that they're cheap and they don't spend and they let good players walk. Got to make that change here with Tee Higgins. And actually, as we were getting ready to film this video, Tee Higgins put out a tweet that was kind of funny here at about 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. He said, "I'm going to let you all know first," meaning all his Twitter friends out there on social media. Imagine if he was the one to break that story. That certainly would be very funny, but Tee Higgins certainly is thinking about his upcoming, possible free agency that he will experience, and it was a nice little joke he had there on social media. Let's get to the pinned comment here. Will Tee Higgins be a Bengal in 2025? Let me know in the comment section. Type Y for yes or N for no. If that ad comes here on YouTube, that's totally fine. Take advantage of it. Get down in the comments. Let us know what you think. All right, as I mentioned at the top of the show, Tee Higgins had a little interview with Joe Danneman of Fox 19, who does a tremendous job covering the Cincinnati Bengals, all sports here in Cincinnati, high school sports as well. Really a great journalist for Fox 19, and we're going to dissect a little bit of their conversation here. Let's get into a little quote here from Tee Higgins. This is what he said to Joe Danneman. He said, "I love it here. I love the city. I love the fans. I love the coaching staff. Everything in the building, but it's not in my control. Obviously, we want to build something here in Cincy, but it's not in my hands right now. I've got to do what I've got to do, and if that's go to another team, that's what happens." Now, I'll break that down here in a moment, but again, our goal here is to share this video as many times as possible. We're trying to break our record here in the month of February. Obviously, we're only about 11 days in, but right now the record is 21 shares. Going for 22 here on this video, as I mentioned at the top. There's people that are really locked in on the Cincinnati Bengals and our fans, but don't necessarily know what we're doing here at Bengals Breakdown. Let's change it. Let's share today's video for me right now. Takeaway number one for me is he clearly loves it here in Cincinnati. One of the things he brought up in his interview with Joe Danneman is the T chant, of course, that the whole stadium kind of joins in on when Tee Higgins has a reception at a home football game. So that certainly stood out to me. And also, he said it feels like a second home. Tee Higgins, of course, is from Tennessee, and he said a lot of ways when he's walking around the community here, it feels like he is back in Tennessee just because of the way that he is received by the fan base. And when you hear, I really encourage you guys to check out this interview. It's only about 5 minutes long, but just hearing Tee Higgins and the way that he speaks about the city of Cincinnati, it's pretty clear that he wants to stay here. And really, he's just a great guy when you kind of sit down and hear him talk. Very personable dude. And, everything Tee Higgins says, you really like coming out of his mouth. And he really just blows you away at really how professional he is. And really, he isn't that old, right? He's only been in the league for a few years, but he's very, very mature and certainly can understand why Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow want him to stick around as far as the organization goes. Also, he brought up that Joe Burrow was putting pressure on the front office, and he kind of joked around and was smiling a little bit when he said that. Burrow, of course, was at the Super Bowl. I think he probably was planning on going to the Super Bowl regardless, but he made a point to kind of continually hammer it home as he made the rounds through Radio Row that, hey, we need to pay Tee Higgins, and really putting pressure on the front office. Thought it was kind of funny that Tee Higgins acknowledged that and didn't shy away from that and said, yeah, it's essentially exactly what Joe Burrow was doing. But potentially the most intriguing part of the whole interview with Danneman was the fact that he, too, brought up Mike Gesicki. A lot of us here, with the media here at Bengals Breakdown, we certainly were pulling for Mike Gesicki to come back, but it was a bit of a shock to hear Joe Burrow speak about Mike Gesicki the way he did at the Super Bowl, and then Tee Higgins follow it up and talk about Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki obviously transcends your offense completely. He is a guy that is a reliable football player, and I think he really just plays well with Joe Burrow, Tee Higgins, and Jamar Chase. He's really not a tight end, right? He's a big slot guy. Again, a reliable guy that you can always trust to be in the right spot, a great teammate, great veteran player. And he really was the secret weapon to their offense in 2024. And it is very noteworthy that along with Joe Burrow, Tee Higgins also really wants Mike Gesicki to be back in 2025. Another opportunity for you guys to get involved with our show here at Bengals Breakdown. Will Mike Gesicki be a Bengal in 2025? Let me know in the comments. Type A for yes or B for no. Now, make no mistake about this. If the Bengals disrespect Tee Higgins, which they have a history of doing such things, he'll leave. This isn't, he said really nice things about the city of Cincinnati. He clearly wants to be here, but if they don't give him the money that he deserves, he's out, right? Yeah, that is very clear to me. It wasn't, the way he talked wasn't like, yeah, I'll do whatever it takes to stay here in Cincinnati. No, if they kind of disrespect him, as I said, and don't give him the contract in which he has earned, he'll bounce. So, it's very, very important for the Cincinnati Bengals to get that figured out and make sure they're offering him something that is, very respectful and just matches with the performance that he's put out there on the football field. And by the way, I don't blame him for this at all, right? He's, been in the league 4 or 5 years, right? He is never going to be more valuable, especially coming off, having Joe Burrow as his quarterback. This is his chance here in his football career to make the most money. And, looking out for his family. I'm not exactly sure, where Tee Higgins came from exactly, obviously in Tennessee, but what he came up with. It's his job right now for his family to get as much money as possible, and that's something that, he needs to think about, and I don't blame him at all for that. Now, he also admitted that the injuries did kind of get to him early on in the season. If you remember, Tee Higgins missed the first couple of games with that hamstring and really was kind of battling injuries throughout the entirety of the year. And he said going into last season it was the best offseason of his career, and then it was kind of a shock, right, to get the injury and then have to deal with that. He admitted that, hey, he had to see some people talk it out. He was not right mentally, but credit to him for kind of overcoming that and producing at the end of the year the way he did. Because I think it is very important to note that there was a point this season where Tee Higgins wasn't going to be breaking the bank, right, because he started out with the injuries and then it kind of took him a second to get going. It really, if it weren't for that finish to the season, I don't know if we're talking about Tee Higgins being the hottest free agent out there. I think a lot of the reason you're talking about that is the way he finished the season. So I certainly think that is noteworthy. The injuries are concerning, but also of note, he played through a ton, right? He went off in that Denver game, and he was completely banged up in that game as well. So you got to give him his kudos. There's a narrative out there that he's soft. That's completely ridiculous. Yeah, he might be a little bit injury prone, but he goes out there and he battles through stuff for his teammates. And lastly here, he admitted that he was pulling for the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl. I thought that was kind of funny because that just shows me how much he truly, to his core, is a Cincinnati Bengal, right? Him and Jamar Chase very much align there. Jamar Chase, I'm sure you saw on his Instagram story, had the meme of, the one person getting beat up and the Bengals person sitting in the corner taking a video of it, and they were saying that was the Bengals and the Eagles were beating up on the Chiefs or whatever. But look, Tee Higgins is fully immersed in this rivalry. I love that, and I really hope Cincinnati is able to find a way to get things to work out with him so the next time they have to play Mahomes and the Chiefs, he's out there on the football field with them. Now, we will have this entire Tee Higgins saga covered for you guys here at Bengals Breakdown, all through free agency, all the updates that certainly will arise at some point. We'll have them here at Bengals Breakdown. So don't miss out. Hit that sub button, youtube.com/BengalsTV.